And so today, we hear the story of the disciple we have come to call Doubting Thomas, the one who doubted that the other disciples had seen the risen Lord, who said he wouldn't believe unless he could see and touch the risen Christ for himself. Now, down through the centuries, the church has been rather hard on Thomas, and I suppose with good reason, because since that day, believers have had to believe without seeing. And so the message has been, don't be like Thomas. Don't doubt, but believe. That's the church's take on Thomas, the church's line. And I suppose that's the line I should take this morning, what I should preach. But I can't, because frankly, I rather like Thomas. I mean, Thomas wanted to know the truth, whatever the truth turned out to be. He probably wanted to believe very much that Christ has risen, but he could not make what he wanted things to be the truth of God. If Christ had not risen, then he would face that. He wanted to know the reality of God, no matter what that reality turned out to be. So he wanted to see for himself and wasn't about to shut out the world or close his mind in order to make something seem true that may not have been true at all. And that's what I like about it. Frankly, instead of being an example of disbelief, Thomas should be seen as a model of true belief, how we come to have a strong, enduring faith. One thing we overlook about the story of Thomas is that it was because of his doubt that he discovered the reality of the risen Christ. Christ did not dismiss his doubt, but came to him in his doubt. And his doubting actually brought him to faith. If anything, Thomas offers us a model of an approach we need to take to discover the truth of God. And this approach, as one author has pointed out, is similar to the approach the scientist must take to reality. She writes, science must remain open to its own overthrow. As science investigates reality, it must doubt and question in order to seek the truth of things. And it must be prepared to leave behind old notions and beliefs and understandings and welcome new understandings. And that should be the case with all who seek to think about God. We should not be afraid of doubt, as I just said earlier, but use doubts and questions to seek the truth of God and be prepared to reformulate some beliefs and understandings, even leave them behind in order to formulate new ones. Our thinking about God is never to be just static, but dynamic, changing, open to new understandings. That's what leads us to a deeper understanding of God and to greater faith. In other words, doubt is healthy and good for faith. As another author has said, doubt is the ants in the pants of faith. Keeps it alive and moving. And as strange as it may sound, what often keeps us from God is our beliefs, our religious beliefs. That's what often blinds us to the truth of God and keeps us from faith. And it's what the Bible tells us again and again. The earlier author I mentioned, said that the Bible can be read as one long story about how God demolishes belief in order to create room for space, new belief. I mean, Abraham and Sarah believed that Ishmael was the child God had promised them, the child they had been waiting for. But then one day Sarah took Abraham's hand and pressed it against her belly. And Abraham felt the strong kick of a child to be named Isaac, the true child of promise, the child their belief did not prepare them for. And the prophet Elijah, well, he believed that the voice of God would fall from heaven like fire, or roar like an approaching tornado, or set the ground a-trembling like an earthquake. And that's what he listened for, and thus almost missed the whispering sound of sheer silence. the very voice of the Lord. And the people of Israel, they believed that the only way God could release them from captivity in Babylon was to act as God has always acted in the past. So they looked to the past, they lived in the past, and nearly missed the new, stunning thing God was doing in the present, something that God had never done before. And that's why the Pharisees didn't recognize Jesus, because of their beliefs, their religious beliefs. They believed that they knew what the Messiah would look like and how he would act and what he would say. They believed they knew the mind of God, and so they missed God when God stood right in front of their noses. And even the disciples didn't realize who Jesus was because they couldn't believe that the Messiah of God would suffer and die, that God just couldn't work like that. And later, even after the disciples had seen the risen Christ and were out risking their necks for his sake, their beliefs still got in the way, still kept them from seeing the truth of God. I mean, good old Peter believed that he knew who the good guys were and who the bad guys were, who was acceptable and who was not, who was welcome and who was not. So God had to straighten him out. Once again, God had to demolish Peter's neat little belief system until Peter finally got the picture that God welcomed all who sought God. And it wasn't Peter's job to play God, but to serve God and welcome all whom God welcomed. Again and again in Scripture, it's belief that must be demolished so that we come to better belief, deeper faith. And when doubt and questions, what they finally do, you could say, is they force us to discover the God beyond the God we often believe in. Beyond the God we have made in our own image. And that's why now more than ever we need healthy doubt, lots of questions. In this fearful and uncertain world, in this world in which so much has changed, in this world in which we feel that so much is beyond our control, more and more believers have made God into a little God that amazingly enough fits perfectly with their agendas and plans and purposes, with their bias, opinions, politics, whatever, and who exists to give them exactly what they want. And let me tell you, these little gods are selling big right now. And what I'm saying is, don't be taken in by such nonsense. Doubt the little gods people have made and the beliefs that go with it. Like Thomas, seek the truth of God. I mean, when you hear Christians refer to the book of Revelation as if it was the only book in the Bible and say that world events are a fulfillment of its prophecies and that the end is near, doubt it big. Question it big time. Go back to the Gospels and seek out the Christ who said we're not even to worry about such things, but rather we're just to keep at our job, which is to be the kingdom ourselves, be him to others, serve others, and help bring near God's own kingdom of peace and healing and hope. Let God worry about the other stuff. Or when you hear Christians, and you will hear Christians spew hatred against people who are different from them, when you hear Christians judging and condemning others, oh, I doubt it. I doubt it big. Question it big time. Go back to the Gospels. Seek the Christ who welcomed all of the fine religious people of the day, condemned and treated as outcasts, who touched the untouchable, who welcomed all to his table, who sought God. And oh yeah, when you hear politicians of either party, and I mean any stripe, any party, glibly invoke the name of God, use God to further their ambitions and plans to get your voter support, claim God's personal endorsement, I doubt it. I think I doubt it really big. Question it big time. Go back to the Gospels. Seek the Christ who in obedience to God refused to go along with any political or national agenda and called for ultimate loyalty to God above all other loyalties. Or when you hear Christians speak of God as the great vending machine in the sky, as if God's sole purpose is to bless us with whatever we want, simply put in a prayer and out comes our answer, whatever it is, the material thing we want. Yeah, I doubt it. Doubt it big. Go back to the Gospels. Discover the Christ who calls us to serve the deep needs of others, to be there for others, to forget ourselves enough to be there for others. And the same is true if you hear Christians write off suffering or hurting or hungry in this world. Doubt it. Question it big time. Go back to the Gospels and discover the truth of Christ. The amazing thing about the resurrection is Christ remained a wounded Christ. The scars, the wounds were still visible, which was to say, we live in a broken, hurting world still. And it's to realize, as someone else has put it, the resurrection was not the end, but the beginning of God's campaign to conquer all that hurts and destroys us. So if ever we need some healthy doubt, it is now. Because more than ever, we need some better beliefs, some true faith. More than ever, we need to have some beliefs demolished, maybe, so we get beyond the little gods to the one and true God. We need that God, the real God, the true God, the Lord of all creation, who can work the impossible, who can do what we will or refuse to do. The God beyond all nations and over all nations, who has the power to heal this broken world and bring hope. More than ever, what we need are people of faith. People who believe in the God Scripture reveals and who follows the Christ of the Gospels. In other words, we need some more Thomases, not less. People who are willing to question and doubt what passes for Christian belief and seek the truth of God. People who, like Thomas, discover the truth of the wounded, risen Christ and finally say, my Lord and my God, and then follow in faith to wherever he leads. Amen.